Welcome everyone to the ASPA podcast. My name is Karen Neckelman and I am the marketing coordinator. And today we are with Patty Crow. She is Associate Principal for Instruction at John Hersey High School, District 214 in Illinois. Hi, Patty. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Of course. So before we start with the topic, can you tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. I grew up in the area. I went to a 211 school, James B. Conant. And then when it came time to go ahead and pursue education, I did my associates at Harper and then went ahead and traveled to Northeastern for my bachelor's. What's really an interesting component was I did a lot of my observation hours at Hersey before I student taught, and I kind of just have been here for the last 18 years. I student taught, then became a teacher, division head of English and Fine Arts and EL, and now I'm the associate principal for instruction. I think something a little different about me is I actually kind of took advantage of career pathways when I was in high school and I got a cosmetology license. So I actually can cut hair. So
Oh, really?
if it doesn't work out, I always
Yeah, you have
always have that
you
in
have
my
a
back
backup
pocket.
plan.
Yeah, it was great because I got to pay for college and it was just such a
Uh-huh.
cool opportunity that I know that 211 and both 214 offer as of today.
That's great. So today we are going to talk about hiring practices and how to hire and retain staff.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your overall philosophy or approach to hiring teachers and staff that align with your school and district's vision?
Yeah, so I always have a very funny inside joke, and my two hiring criteria are simple, not crazy, not lazy. But no, truly, it's you look for people that are adaptable and align with your district's mission. I think, a lot of the questions that we offer during the interview process really are more personality based. I think having gone through hundreds of interviews at this point, and interviewing people, there's candid responses that you could simply chat GPT, but there's really core beliefs and there's questions that kind of lead to some of those core beliefs. So we really try to find people that care about kids and want to go above and beyond for kids and understand that the landscape of teaching is changing. So to me, a lot of our questions kind of really assess whether or not someone is adaptable, whether or not they're willing to roll up their sleeves and, really think outside the box. And I found that sometimes the questions that you ask are really important. And, I've done a lot of work with our committees, a lot of staff input, and really reviewing questions and pushing our staff a little bit more in terms of not only are we interviewing someone else, we're reviewing our own values and beliefs. And it's a really good opportunity to even professionally develop your staff committee because, when it comes to grading practices and interventions, you can really embed what you want from the administrative lens within those interview questions. And it also bleeds into that committee. So it's a cool opportunity to develop both internally and find your best candidate out there.
That sounds great. So, can you walk us through the hiring process from posting a position to making like a final offer?
Sure. We definitely work through the district in terms of frontline and making some of those processes streamlined. One of the things that we do in our hiring process that I'm really proud of is we do screening amongst our committee. So if we have 80 applicants, we will have a committee, for instance, from English, screen all 80 applicants with the administrator in charge of that area so that they don't feel like we hand selected, we chose, we're really ethical from the get-go, and we make sure that they're heard and their input is felt throughout the very beginning. And then, when we have internal candidates come within, we ultimately give them, an identical process. So we have an internal interview process that goes all the way from security to maintenance to administration. And it's very transparent amongst all parties involved. And we're constantly editing and evolving it every year. And one of my favorite things in that process is like we have a writing prompt in which we have like a parent email and a student email, and you have to handwrite it. You can't even type it. Like we want to get to know what you are at your core.
Uh-huh.
And something that sometimes like I've found people cheating on that. They have like their
Oh, really?
like taking out their device and I'm like, like
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
red flag. So, trying to make sure that we try to find out who the human beings are because it's a multi-million-dollar deal at the end of the day with just how tenure works. And so we're extremely proud of like from the beginning to the end. And even our onboarding process is streamlined as a school. Like when do you get them a swag bag? When do you get them their computer? Like we really try to make sure that every process for every single staff member is consistent and
Mhm.
thorough from the beginning.
And how do you collaborate with the principal, division heads, and other stakeholders during the staffing and hiring process?
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, we have like a hiring mega doc of all the interview questions, all of the process, all the steps that need to be taken. So that way we're real consistent from the division head working with their committee to when the process is brought to the principal lens, to the assistant principal lens. And I think to me, what's been really important is making sure that our division heads are being selective, but also equitable when it comes to choosing their committees. So a
Mhm.
lot of times we'll review as an administrative team, like who needs their cup filled right now, right? There's some people that might have not felt like they've been tapped for leadership at all. And serving on an interview committee, believe it or not, is like something that people really think it's honorable and they think it's just this amazing opportunity from a staff lens. So understanding like what it means to people. And
Mhm.
so we typically discuss what the committee is going to look like at all the way from the principal to like I said, anybody that is on the forefront of division head or direct supervisor. So thinking through all those decisions and the impact it'll have because intent versus impact is very different, right? So we try to be mindful of that.
Yeah, so you try to have like a pretty inclusive committee to make sure
Yeah,
you are,
yeah.
you
So
get,
we'll
yeah.
mix it up with veterans. We'll mix it up with newbies. We'll mix it up with, oh, this person hasn't served on a committee in a long time. They might need their cup filled, right? They're
Mhm.
a 20-year teacher who might just feel a little disgruntled right now. And as I mentioned before, it's a really good time to also professionally develop your crew because you get to instill some of those values and sometimes seeing how competitive the process is. Like we could have up to 120 applicants for a teaching job. And we're very fortunate in that, but it also humbles our staff in a way like, hey, remember like when you applied 25 years ago, it wasn't as crazy competitive as it is now. So when I think you bring some veteran, when you see some newbies who would just experience the process and like, hey, this could have been improved, or I felt this during the interview, like they still will speak to it and give that constructive feedback for us to improve practice, which I absolutely love.
Mhm. So would you say that retention is like more of a problem than recruiting?
Yes,
Yes,
because
because you mentioned you had like a lot of applicants, but then
yeah,
the retention part is the hardest.
yes, because interviews are short stints of time. We usually typically have anywhere from 3 to 4 rounds, but you're talking about 3 to 4 hours with an individual candidate.
Hmm.
But when it comes to being on the ground, and we do a lot with our district, with our TLFs, our teaching learning facilitators, and with mentors, with we do have a plethora of professional development to develop the newbies,
Hmm.
our new hires. But as you mentioned, like that's the harder part is deciding whether or not we have 3-year tenure in Illinois. And so for me, it's a very short amount of time to make a multi-million-dollar deal. And so
Yeah.
we have, very strict stipulations when it comes to the amount of observations you have to do and all that. So to me, we have to be very strategic in getting in to see our teachers and making sure that they're involved and they're, bought in and they align with the vision and mission of our district and school. And you don't have much time. I know 3 years sounds like a lot of time, but typically you get about 2 years because the third year, you don't want to just cut people loose. It
Yeah.
seems the timeline is a little more challenging. So for us, I think it's a little bit more, we have to do our best in making sure that they're the right fit. And I think that's a harder, because now you're messing with people's lives, right? Like
Yeah, sure.
they've hired, they're starting their lives with our school. So it's definitely, we want to make sure that the hiring process is as solid as it can be. So as I mentioned to you before, is, we've had over a 90% retention rate. We have not had to cut a lot of people based on our interview process, which I'm so super, super proud
Yeah,
of.
that is great. What role does data play in determining staff needs?
Sure. I think, I think the data will ultimately determine what type of teacher you're going to hire. So if you're going to hire an English teacher, what is the current need in terms of the data? So for instance, at Hersey, we've had an increase in our ML/EL program. So right now it is a non-negotiable in terms of hiring someone with that endorsement. So that to me has been, so if anyone out there is listening, get your ML/EL endorsement or your LBS1, because it's a game changer in terms of compliance. So we'll utilize that data to inform how we're going to hire. And that's been a big one, is we've used our increase in numbers to determine, and also whether or not they're going to be going ahead and teaching other courses based on the needs of that division. So we've seen a dip in our AP numbers. Does this person have some AP background in what they've taught? So using some of the data from our annual review and our biannual review will be huge in terms of like, what is our need going into the hiring process.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, and to finish our conversation, before I let you go, how do you see the hiring process evolving in the next few years to meet the changing needs of students and staff?
That's a great question. I think it's going to evolve in, I think AI does a lot, right? I think the use of AI. So I don't think AI will take people's jobs. It's just going to give you the edge if you are not familiar with how to maximize the use of AI. So for me, I will interview candidates and they'll say like, I'm so exhausted because everyone's cheating because of AI. Well, we know AI is here and it's not going away. So how do we find candidates that are going to push other skills that students need to obtain, as opposed to just, griping about the fact that they get to cheat with AI? Like we have to push our staff in a little different, like Spark Notes, for instance. Before Spark Notes, we had to evolve after Spark Notes came.
Yeah.
So how do you assess, a student's comprehension if there's Spark Notes out there? How are you going to assess a student's understanding of different content if AI is here? And how are we using AI as a thinking partner? So for me, thinking about the interview process, I think going back to like my joke earlier is like having people making sure that they can't cheat with AI to sell me a different version of themselves, but more so like how are they going to leverage what the future entails of education, and how much work have they done behind the scenes to really prepare themselves for the new age of education. I think is going to be huge in terms of how we hire and how we screen candidates.
Okay, that is great. Thank you, Patty, for joining us. It was really
Thank
fun
you for
talking to
having
you,
me.
and hope to have you in the podcast again sometime.
Yeah, I would love it. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Take care.